was about to take place that would shake the foundations of the civilized world.
It is time to open your mind. Time to discover your divine self as we navigate this holographic matrix together. Strap in, cosmic family, as we slide through this wormhole of cosmic information together in search of the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
It's time to go inside the matrix. With your host, Jimmy Brent.
All right, welcome everybody to Inside the Matrix today with our special guest, Gene "Chip" Tatum. Gene was a Vietnam Special Forces Air Combat Controller, Defense Intelligence Asset, and U.S. Army Special Operations Pilot flying classified missions. He was also involved in the Nixon administration's relations with China, NASA's Apollo program, the Iran-Contra affair, and many other classified intelligence operations through 1992, working directly for sitting presidents. From sensitive and highly secret and largely unknown Special Forces covert operations in Cambodia to CIA Black Ops activities in Grenada and Oliver North's Iran-Contra enterprise, Gene knows where the skeletons are buried and who buried them. Gene, I've been following your work for a long, long time, and I hold you in the highest regard, and I respect what you're doing and trying to share truthful information with people from somebody who's been on the inside for many, many years. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jimmy. And I'd like to make one statement. I'm an innocent man. I've done nothing wrong.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And I would suggest people, if you want to know more detail about Gene's background, go to chiptatum.com and read Confessions of a Black Ops Commander. And you'll have a lot more information there. And there's some really good articles, too, there written by Gene. Gene, anything else you want to add to your background and, maybe how you were raised and what your thoughts were at the time when you first got into a lot of this stuff, and then maybe what your thinking is these days?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me, how do I get involved in this nasty situation? And it was quite by accident. I joined the Air Force during the Vietnam conflict, and I joined the Air Force because I had made an F in a chemistry exam, and so I had no choice. They gave me the option: join a service, or you're going to be drafted into the Army. I kind of liked the Navy, but I didn't because of the bell-bottom jeans. Now this is the '70s, folks. This is late '69, and I liked the bell-bottom jeans and Cambry shirts, but I didn't like the idea of staying out on a ship 6 months a year. Even though I'm a Florida boy, the Marines. My uncle just came back from Vietnam, and he'd been napalmed by our own jets, so I really didn't want to go there. And the Army, a friend of mine who graduated the class, came back from Vietnam, and we used to be hunting buddies, and we went out hunting when he came back, and he asked us to shoot his damn finger off so he didn't have to go back. So I knew I didn't want to go to the Army. And the Air Force recruiter told me, look, Chip, even if you do go to Vietnam, we're going to make you an air traffic controller, and you'll be sitting in an air-conditioned control tower. So Air Force, you're my buddy. So I went to technical school I went to basic training at Lackland and technical school for air traffic control at Keesler Air Force Base. And in the top 10% of the class, they pulled a bunch of us aside, the top 10%, and took 5 of us and put us into a special career field called combat control. And so we trained as combat controllers, which is a special forces branch of the United States Air Force. I was subsequently sent for further training and ended up on a TDY to NKP, Thailand. We were there setting up some beacons and for classified operations across into Laos and Cambodia.
So that was communications you were setting up, right?
Right, communications for the monitoring movement throughout the jungles and throughout the area. Mm-hmm. And there was a special operation called by the White House, actually, to get Lon Nol. Lon Nol was the premier of Cambodia, and they needed to get him off the proverbial fence. He was taking arms and money and other things from China. He was taking them from us, and he just wouldn't get off the fence. And Nixon had decided, we need to have, well, it was the Nixon administration, not actually Nixon, but we need to have Cambodia backing us in the fights down there. We need Cambodia, we need Laos, we need all these countries so that we can exit. That was the exit strategy. Get everyone backing South Vietnam, and then there was an exit strategy. But Lon Nol wouldn't leave that proverbial fence, so it was decided to push him off the fence. So Operation Red Rock was designed to do just that. It was a covert operation. Actually, it was a pretty bad covert operation, because we're their allies, and we dressed as Viet Cong going in to Cambodia and blowing up the Cambodian airport.
Wow.
And it was touted afterwards. It was touted as one of the finest operations that the North Vietnamese and Khmer Rouge had ever worked together to do.
Oh my God.
And I was involved in it only because I was in NKP at the time, and the communications specialist on Team Red Rock broke his leg in a training accident, and I was
Volunteered.
I was approached, and I was volunteered. I didn't volunteer. Two of us survived that. Only two of us.
Oh, wow.
My platoon sergeant and myself.
And then you got captured, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we were captured, held for 92 days, and we were liberated by a Marine Recon Patrol. They didn't even know we were in there. And by the time the firefight was over, two of us were alive.
Oh. Man, when you live through something like that, it's really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I'll say. And this whole thing, the operation was planned by the White House. They had Haig, Kissinger, Colby, the whole White House gang, and it was actually briefed. Colby was the one of the heads of the CIA at the time in Vietnam, and the mission was actually briefed by he and Haig and Shackley. So when we survived, we weren't expected to survive. They didn't want us to survive. Thus, they didn't send the aircraft in at the LZ to pick us up. The rendezvous. So we fought our way out. We finally made it out because of the Marine Recon Patrol, and we were to be held close because of the classified information we held. And so in holding me close, I was wounded. I couldn't continue as a combat controller, but we had top secret clearances, all of us. So I remained in communications, and worked under the control of the Defense Intelligence Agency and the CIA in all my military assignments. I was stationed in Guam. I was stationed communications controlled on board SAM, which are special aircraft mission aircraft, which is what the Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, all of those government entities fly in these aircraft. And in those days, we didn't have satellite communications. So any phone calls they wanted to make from the aircraft, they made over HF radio, which the airborne operator would hook up, listen, monitor, because they had to turn the microphone on and off for send and receive. It wasn't a full duplex operation, and so we would be monitoring all their conversations to wherever they would call into White House switch, speak with the president, speak with family members. And Kissinger was big at speaking with his girlfriends, So
Oh man,
we heard a lot. So
unbelievable. And then shortly after that, you received pilot training, right?
Many years later.
Was
a
it
decade
many years?
later?
Okay.
Right, a decade later. I'd been a pilot already. I was already not a military pilot, but a private pilot.
Okay.
But yeah, I was again. I had left active duty service into the reserves and living in Colorado when I was reactivated into what was called the 160th, the formation of the 160th after our debacle in Iran, in the hostage rescue situation where all our aircraft crashed into one another in the desert. So we formed 160th. The problem in the desert, everyone wanted a piece of it, all the military services. And close operations like this, they have never worked together in close operations. You had the Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, all trying to work their way in, and no one was there controlling these aircraft, or the wrong type of aircraft were in there without sand filters for the engines, and it was a debacle. That there's no way to say it. It was one of our biggest mistakes for rescue operations in our history, and so it was decided that by the Joint Chiefs, look, we need a special unit that works together and trains together, and that's what the 160th ended up being in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I was sent to I was moved over to the U.S. Army from the Air Force Reserves and sent to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Well, sent to Fort Rucker for helicopter training, and from there to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and that's where we trained in special operations for the Night Stalkers. And from there, we did special operations missions around the world.
So what was your take on the so-called October surprise? And, Bush flying over to make his deal with Iran. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah.
Did you know Gunther Russbacher as well?
Russbacher said he met me once at Homestead Air Force Base when I was there. I don't recall him, but he had said he met me there,
Okay.
and he identified the aircraft that I was in. So he probably did. Yeah, they should have been shot then.
Yeah.
That's my take.
Yeah, absolutely. And okay, also, you were involved heavily with good old Hank Kissinger in the opening up of China. So maybe you could mention to us, I think your involvement was on the communication side once again with that. So you probably heard a lot about what their intentions were.
Right. China had been identified. China was nothing back then in the 70s, really.
Right.
Just a whole lot of people. They didn't have great technology, but they had a large land force, military, and in World War II they were quasi our allies. It was in the planning stages. I can't say how far in the planning stages, but just listening to the conversations made, it was in the planning stages to try to boost this country as an ally in some sort of way, move it away from its communist standing and work it as an ally. And, honestly, Kissinger was working in that, but you could see even more of that in the Clinton administration when they got into the information sharing along those lines and trying to share technology with them to build them. And so this has been, and I'm sure, I have no doubt, but Kissinger had everything to do with moving them forward, growing them, working with the Clintons, working with the different administrations, with Bush, to grow China. I have no doubt about it, just listening to the conversations they had. And, Kissinger has always been one wanting a one world organization, whether you want to,
Yep.
but not a government. Let me explain that to you folks. He didn't want a one world government. He wanted a one world organization where enterprise controlled the world.
We know what the enterprise is, right?
Well, yeah, I worked for them.
Yeah, but now he's literally saying without a one world government, we're not going to make it through this crisis. And I think he had an article in the Wall Street Journal about that. This guy,
a lot of times he would use the name one world order.
Yeah,
you have to be careful about the government.
Well, it's pretty obvious now that they built up China as the model for their one world order. Basically completely full spectrum control of all human beings in all systems in both natural and technological in the entire world. And we're seeing, in my opinion, a psychological operation to measure the extent of their abilities.
There's no doubt. Well, you don't have to measure the extent of China's abilities. I mean,
No, I mean their ability to shut down the world and control people.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, they could make the world dark with the snap of the finger. They make all our light bulbs.
Yeah.
They make circuit boards for our fighting, for our military. Where would we be without China? That's what we've allowed to grow. That's how we've allowed China to grow, and it's devastating for the United States and the economy of the United States.
Absolutely.
And basically, where we come from is in the United States. What it looks like is petroleum is our big entity. Petroleum is one of our great national products, and we see what happens when that went to negative $39.
Yeah. It's absolutely mind-boggling how quickly people will just comply and be okay with it and really have no understanding of their rights as they should be. Now, I'm going to ask you for your take on. Go ahead.
Kissinger made in what you're talking about. Kissinger made a statement concerning the COVID, and I want to talk a little bit about the COVID entity and where it really came from. He said, when the COVID-19 pandemic is over, many countries, institutions will be perceived as having failed. Whether this judgment is objectively fair is irrelevant. The reality is the world will never be the same after the coronavirus. And that's their target. In 2012, the China and United States Exchange Foundation started a steering group. And who headed this steering group? The chairman was Kissinger, and the co-chairman was Bill and Melinda Gates.
Oh, yeah. More front people.
And it's if you guys ever get a chance, it's in my book, the VEER. But if you ever get a chance, go online and look for U.S.-China 2022 and look at the members on those boards. You have Duke Energy, you have all of them there saying, and this steering council is how to steer the economy of the world.
Oh, yeah. And then you've got the Event 201 that the Gates Foundation, right, Johns Hopkins, and all these other same players put on in October of last year to basically game the idea of COVID. They use the same name and everything. So this is completely contrived, completely set up and run as an operation, basically. And people don't have, most people are pretty much clueless on how these things run and how they work. And I'm sure you saw the psychological side of it too, even dating back to Vietnam. We can't hear you, Gene. We don't know if you can hear us or not, but we'll try and reconnect and move that out. But anyway, I was talking about Event 201. And it's so obvious that they had this entire scenario planned out in advance, and then they literally decided to execute it and put it into play.
Okay, I'm back. I lost you for a minute there.
Great. Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
As soon as I asked you about the psychological effects, even dating back to Vietnam, right?
Well, fear. That's the whole thing.
Yep.
Create fear, and you can control the masses. You can make the sheep march in line. The sheep, the dog puts fear in the sheep to control them. But the sheep herder, it's not because they're just trained to do it. It's because they fear going outside those lines. The Pavlovian effect, huh?
Oh yeah. We've seen that big time. It's just really sad to me that more people aren't catching on. But there are some glimmers of hope. But I want to read something that Herr Kissinger was quoted on back at a special speech to the World Health Organization Council on Eugenics, February 25th, 2009. So this will tell you where he's coming from. Quoting, Once the herd accepts mandatory forcible vaccination, it's game over. They will accept anything, forcible blood or organ donation for the greater good. We can genetically modify children and sterilize them for the greater good. Control sheep minds and you control the herd. Vaccine makers stand to make billions, and many of you in this room today are investors. It's a big win-win. We thin out the herd, and the herd pays us for providing extermination services. And then he asks, now, what's for lunch? This is the mentality of what we're up against, everybody. In case you didn't know, this is the psychopathy and the insanity that's running our world.
Well, and you know, everyone says, well, our government can do this, our government can do that. But governments are dependent upon one thing: funds. Mm-hmm. And when you bring the economy to its knees, and you have all these different governments with different ideas and of how they think the world should be, and you know, you have Russia who wants to dominate this area. You have in World War II Germany who wanted to dominate Europe. You know, you have all these dominating factors of governments and their ideas. But how would you ever bring those all together into a single entity? You never would. You have to bring them all to their knees, and that's exactly what they've done with COVID.
Yep. And now, are you able to identify the actual competing factions?
Some of them.
We probably don't even know them all, right? Because there's so much is hidden.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple Russian oligarchs involved in this. There's one out of Germany that I'm aware of. There's three out of China, and then there's the good old US of A. But I'll tell you what, there's none out of South America where we are in these controlling entities.
Okay, so who would you say is in control of South America at this point?
Whoever has money, because South America has none.
So basically the banks then.
Right.
Right. Uh-huh. Okay, yeah, we definitely want to
exactly.
Get into that.
It's all about the money.
Yep. And because we have this central bank private system that we allowed, that the traders in Congress and our trader president Woodrow Wilson allowed in 1913. This is a long-term result. Anyway, we're coming up against the break, Gene. We're going to take a short pause right here. So please stick around with us. You're listening to Inside the Matrix with our special guest, Gene Chip Tatum. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Inside the Matrix with our special guest, Gene Chip Tatum. One thing we were talking about on the break with Gene, I wanted to get his opinion on and let you all hear it. A lot of people think there's so many, different ideas about what's really happening out there, and many of us are just trying to figure it all out in spite of the proliferation of disinformation and misdirection that we see all the time. But what's your take on Trump? Is he read in? Is he read out? Obviously, he's surrounded by what we would call deep staters, right, Gene?
The Donald is not invited to the elitist party. He doesn't fall under the same. They don't feel that he's elite enough. They don't feel that he's trustworthy enough for what they want. He hasn't fallen in line, and that's why they had to surround him. You saw who they surrounded him with, who the RNC surrounded him with.
Yep.
Yeah. All these trolls and moles, and he's gone through hell trying to get rid of them. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah, they're just going to be there, and if he gets rid of one, they're going to pop in another one in his place, right? So speaking of moles. Right. Let's talk about Bill Barr and Robert Mueller, the two buddies, long-term buddies.
Oh my God! I couldn't believe them bringing them back into play. It spoke the world. Mueller. We used him to clean up our messes. To Mueller, we did it. We were going to do a move in the '80s before the Iran-Contra trials. One of the Iran-Contra leaders who was aware of the drugs being moved was due to testify, and he told us, he said, what I want to do is I want X amount of dollars, and I want it delivered to me, and I'll leave, and otherwise I'm gonna rat you guys out. And so Bush called and said, okay, take it to him. So we went. We took the briefcase with $1 million to him. We were waiting outside his home and his girlfriend's home. We weren't sure where he was.
To Mueller, we're talking about?
No, well, Mueller comes in later.
Okay.
This is an Iran-Contra figure,
Okay.
one of the Contra leaders, who was going to give us up for the drugs when he went to testify, the drugs that the Contras were actually making in the camps. So what happened was he saw me, and he knew me, and so he ran to his Beamer, and he took off, ended up crashing. We followed him to try to give him the money to put him on a plane. I was to give him the money, put him on the plane, and get him out of the country. And he died in the crash. And it was Mueller, who was in Miami at the time. It was Mueller for the Noriega stuff that was tasked with cleaning it up. And if you read all the newspaper articles, about this accident, it's obvious that he was the cleanup man. He was the cleaner, and he got us out of a lot of trouble a lot of times through the department, DOJ, a lot of times. Our operations never really went off real well, perfectly, and when there was a problem, this is the man that would come in as the cleaner and fix it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's talk about Bill Barr.
Bill Barr, CIA analyst, and knew Mueller from the old days. Now, Mueller also was involved in Project Phoenix in Vietnam. And, with Phoenix and his contacts there with the CIA and Bill Barr as an analyst, there was a camaraderie there in early years. And that camaraderie continued throughout. Bill Barr is the one who writes the orders, who would write the orders, and I forget what it's called, where he advises the president whether a certain invasion is legal, is illegal, or and there's a particular name for that, and I just don't recall what it is. I've been down here in a South American country speaking Spanish too long. I've lost a lot of my English.
So we're talking about Panama now, right?
And we're talking about he wrote the orders for the Panama invasion. Now he's back in DOJ, and he's writing the orders for the invasion on Venezuela. This is what's going on. This is, it's just business as usual with these same guys coming in. If it worked in the past, there's no reason it shouldn't work now. That's their attitude. However, with petroleum at the price it is, I don't know that the invasion of Venezuela is worth it right now.
Doesn't really make any sense, does it?
No, it doesn't.
So you've got all these people out there thinking, oh, Bill Barr's going to clean up. He's going to go after Mueller. He's going to go after all of these, globalist deep state operatives. So that kind of shoots a hole in all that, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. Not going to happen. Yeah.
And,
he does. I think he will go out and get some of these FBI guys. Only because his intelligence background and all, he never did, even though he was the head of the DOJ, he never really liked the FBI. Their attitudes were just wrong. They had the better than thou attitudes, and he wasn't kind of the outgoing guy that these FBI heads were, and so they would always feel like they were a head above him, even though he was the attorney general and their boss. But so he never really has liked the FBI, and he has always stated that he serves the office of the president. Okay, so what is the office of the president? It isn't the man; it's the office, and that's where he will. I think he will continue to work to try to keep the office of the president intact. But the president, it doesn't matter who's there.
Yeah, that's an important distinction, isn't it?
Right.
So basically, the way I see it, he's going to get out there and he'll definitely bring charges on some probably lower level people, maybe one sort of middle management guy, but he's definitely not going to try and take down Brennan, McCabe, Comey, and all those guys, right?
Clapper. I'd love to see him taking down Clapper. Clapper was one of the intel briefers at Red Rock that knew what was going to happen to us and what our destiny was.
And was happy to expend you guys, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Those kind of people. Ugh. It's just so incredibly sad that we're in this position now where, the people are just completely befuddled, completely lost, by and large, the majority of people, dumbed down and absolutely convinced by, the facade that we have called mainstream media of what's going on. It just is amazing to me. And this is, it's been a long-term plan. This is not something that they just started in the last few years. This has been going on for many, many years. And that brings to mind, Operation Paperclip and that whole thing. Did you ever have any information on that, or is that something that you've looked into?
Oh yeah, I did a whole big a show on Operation Paperclip and how the media is controlled. I think it's probably in the archives on chiptatum.com. I'd have to look and see, but I think it's definitely on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, to me, I think it has such an incredible influence on what we see today, because a lot of this, global government, whether it's a new world order or new world government, it's a control system one way or another. And it sounds to me very much like the Nazi doctrine.
Well, Bill Colby was called before Congress and questioned about Paperclip. And, every time I'd listen to that, he was pretty well my mentor when I was brought in. He was the guy who briefed me when I came out of my coma in the Philippines, and he was the one who pretty well watched after me to warn me when Bush came in as the director of the CIA, watch this guy and get out as soon as you can, because he's not your friend. He's no one's friend. So, Colby is someone I always respected, but every time I listened to those clips from Operation Paperclip and the briefing, I had to laugh, him trying to dance around it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then when they talked about in front of Congress with Operation Mockingbird, when they were asked about if they were actually paying people within mainstream media, and I think this was back in the 70s. And they actually admitted it. And then when they got pressed a little further, they said, well, we should take this offline to a private conversation.
To close doors. Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah. So even back then, it was all there, for anyone who was willing to look and see. But now that it's progressed so far and they have the technology to fully measure all of us, our responses to things. And with that kind of technology, they're able to, probably stay several steps ahead of any possible opposition to what they're trying to do.
Well, yeah, and the Stargate personnel, the old MK2, which morphed into Stargate. That the abilities of Stargate, and that's something we worked in out of the auxiliary field outside in Ellis. The abilities of the Stargate personnel are absolutely incredible.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, they're basically remote viewers, but they're remote viewers that can control the Matrix, as you call your show, the Matrix. Right. They can actually go into their target's mind and control that person to act in specific ways. I mean, that's how controlling it is. We saw one example where they were given a map and they were given coordinates. And they were told to go to those coordinates. But I have to say, this is not done without drugs, just so you know. And everyone says, they claim that the MK Ultra program, the later programs weren't drug induced, but they absolutely are. They're drug and electronically induced in the apparatus that they use. And they would go to that particular area. They would say, okay, what do you see? And the Starman was telling him what he sees. And he said, I want you to go to that airport. What do you see at that airport? And he'd tell him what he saw. He said, I want you to give me the tail number off one of those that aircraft. And he gave him the tail number. Absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's my understanding that a lot of what they did with the remote viewing, they're able to do now with technology. And with the proliferation of 5G, it allows them to actually focus. If they have a strong enough signal, they can focus just like a camera and look at things. Have you heard anything about that?
No, but I don't put anything beyond technology. No.
Yeah.
We don't have 5G in Ecuador, and I don't know that we're ever going to get it. The people are really against the 4G and the towers. They chopped down one cell tower here that they tried to put in town.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I love it. All right. So since you mentioned that, let's talk about life of an expat in Ecuador. What's it like? Pros and cons?
Pros for me. It's a dollarized nation for an expat. You don't have exchange rate you're dealing with. The cost of living is about a third that of the United States. The people are very genial. They're great folks. Americans and expats are welcome here because it's a tourist destination. We have the Galapagos here. It's a great place to be. It's not the United States. Let me get that across to people. But we have a lot of retirees. We have a large expat community here, and it has been growing. I don't know what's going to happen after this coronavirus, only because of the economic situation of a lot of people. But in a bad economic situation, a move to Ecuador might be a saving grace for a lot of people. If you can live down here off a $1,200 a month Social Security check, you can live well. Wow,
that's rather inviting.
and yeah. We have everything. We have the equivalent of Home Depot. We have huge shopping malls. We have all that stuff. Imports are pretty expensive, except from China.
Oh.
But I believe we're going to see a roll out of the heavy import taxes coming up here after this COVID in an attempt to bring all the countries together into a single entity, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Well, it appears, and they actually tried to roll out a new digital currency in with this first CARE Act, so-called CARE Act. Oh my God. Yeah, they tried to roll out a lot of stuff, but there's a gigantic wealth transfer back to the banks once again, $2 trillion with this so-called CARE Act that they passed here in the U.S. And I don't know why people don't see that. This is yet another bailout of the failed banking system, and the casino. We're aware of casinos in Vegas and other places, but our entire financial system is based on casino operations of banking. So we saw a giant bailout of $2 trillion to the banks because, of course, we want to make sure our friends and all the big corporations are doing well as we bankrupt the American people and their small businesses. It's just unbelievable to me.
When I asked Bush how he thought he was going to get away with what he wanted to do, he said, Tatum, as long as I keep a roof over their head, food on the table, and gas in their car, they'll do whatever I want them to do.
Well, he was right. Absolutely. And we're seeing it now. And we are seeing more opposition.
A $1,200 check, when you're destitute, a $1,200 check going into them puts a lot in their favor.
Oh yeah, and even though it's a pittance, but it sets a precedent for people to be dependent on that system, right?
Exactly, and that's the whole idea. The dependence of the sheeple of the people of the citizens upon the controlling entity. I'm not going to say the government, but upon the controlling entity, which is the banks, which are the financial institutions. A lot of these countries, like down here, the president of this country said, "I'm going to the World Bank to get a loan," and the World Bank said, "We don't have any money." So who has the money? There's your question.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, follow the money if you
capitalists,
can.
the banks.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's always been.
Trillionaires.
Yeah, it's always been. We have the front people. We know the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and all those front people. We don't really know who's behind all of that because I'm pretty sure there's a lot more to it that's behind and probably will never be disclosed as to who's pulling the strings. Because if we knew the identity of the entities, and I will say that term very loosely, the entities that actually control the financial system, we might have a chance of dissecting it and possibly doing something about it. But we don't. We are operating on such a small amount of data and information that we just sort of flounder around out here in social media world trying to figure it all out.
And a lot of people want to go to the Bilderberger meetings and take photos of who goes in. Well, yeah, take a photo. Those are the representatives.
Yeah, those are the talking heads and the front people, right? Yeah. Were you ever able to parse that in any way to figure out where a lot of this stuff comes from? Obviously Kissinger is a higher level, front person. But who tells him what to do?
I've flown a couple people, and I don't want to get into it because I like my retirement.
Yes.
But there are I have flown a couple people. One in particular that we had to rescue. So yeah, and there is infighting among them and control. It's greed. It's always about greed and who has the power and who has the most money. They feel they have the most power, and it all surrounds that. And when we were in the TWIGs, operational subgroups, many times we were at their beck and call to fly missions. So there are some of them that I am aware of. Yes.
And I've said this many times in the show that the downfall of humanity, there's many, but the two really glaring ones that I see is that people can be bought, and not everybody can be bought, but many, many, many people can be bought, and we see the evidence of it all the time. We see, these politicians in Congress and other places and bureaucrats, basically parasites off of the money that the government has or the money that the government accumulates. And so because of the fact that these people can be bought, they don't work for us. They could care less about us. Their game is to always tell us what all the great things that they're going to do for us while they're gaming the system and profiting for themselves. And the other major problem that we have is people are very, very easily programmed by mainstream media, educational systems, and all that, religions, whatever, into believing whatever the controlling forces want them to believe. So until we become sovereign beings who are aware of who we are and stand up with a moral compass for what's right and what's wrong, we're just going to have more of the same, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, and your statement that everyone can be bought and some can't, but they can be intimidated. So, there you go.
Yeah.
And that's where we came in. Yeah, very easy, very easy. Yeah.
Yeah, and just like the whole Epstein operation, compromising people with the videos of their escapades and things like that. That's super powerful. Right. And it's been, that yourself, that's been going on for a long, long time. And, and there are plenty of perverts out there.
If walls could speak.
Yeah. Absolutely, and so their system is rather well organized and very effective because if you decide to go off the reservation, right, Gene, as they say, well, we've got some pictures and video here. We'd like to, show your wife and the press out there, so they get reined in rather quickly.
Message on Epstein. Look at the message sent to all these people with Epstein. They put him in a high security entity and killed him anyhow.
and all of the video disappeared.
killed
The
him,
guards
you know,
went
so-
to sleep. I mean, oh, come on. It's hilarious. You know, it's in your face. We're jacking you up, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And they're buying it.
Yeah.
Because it's being touted in the mainstream media. They're buying it.
Oh, it's frustrating, you know, and I know there are good people working out there trying to do something. Are you aware, have you gotten into any of this Q stuff and, you know, all that? Is that just it appears to be another psyop to give, you know, hopium for the masses. But are you aware of any groups that are actually trying to do something good?
You know, a lot of people ask me, you know, what can we do? And I like to tell them, I said, work the American way. And, you know, that's the Amway. Remember Amway? I don't know if they're still around. But Amway had their little circle chart, and they would draw circles, and they say, if one person brings in two people, and then these two people bring in two people, and these two people bring in two people, that's how you would grow an organization or grow a movement. But you have to grow the movement. You can't do it by yourself.
Absolutely. All right, we're coming up against the next break. Gene, we're going to take a short pause right here. You're listening to Inside the Matrix with Gene Chip Tatum. We'll be right back in just a little bit. Stick around with us. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Inside the Matrix with our guest, Gene Tatum. We're continuing our conversation here. And, you know, Gene, people always say once in the CIA, always in the CIA. So what's your opinion on that? Since you're in that group there, are you able to be fully autonomous?
Well, they threw me in prison for treason.
That should tell you something, right?
I am not their friend.
So tell us about that. What happened? What led to that?
It was all over the Iran-Contra episode, and over the years, copies of conversations to protect myself. Colby had told me, you need to protect yourself. If you don't have your insurance in place, there will come a time when you'll no longer be needed. You'll no longer be valued. Right. And that time came, and they wanted all my documents. So I said, nope, not going to happen. And they said, if you don't, we're going to charge you with treason, and throw you in, and you'll be put to death. If not that, the minimum is life in prison. I said, well, let's dance. And damn if they didn't dance.
Wow.
So I was thrown in Inglewood Federal Detention Center in Colorado Springs, or in Denver, a few weeks before McVeigh got there.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, they were building, they were building McVeigh's in the reception area. They were building two cells, long-term holding cells in the reception area for 24-hour vigilance. And I asked him, what are you guys building that for? Or they said, and this was before they bombed the building. They said we'd have two high-profile prisoners coming in, and it was Nichols and McVeigh.
Oh, wow. Talk about being set up as a patsy, right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Talk about being set up as the patsies, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, he did it. He admitted that he did it, but he didn't do it alone.
No, and that my understanding is that the truck he was driving and what he had in that truck was not nearly enough to take down that half the building, and that they had planted a lot of charges in that building.
And out that far out on the road. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Our 500-pounders can't take a thing down like that, you know, so.
Pretty obviously another cover up. Yeah. There was a lot of information in that building that they didn't want to get out, is my understanding. And that was a crazy time.
Yes, sir.
Yep. And there seems to be no end to the bag of dirty tricks that are available for these guys. And the thing about
I was a master of them at one time.
Yeah. Yeah, until the dog bites the owner, right? Or bites the hand that is assisting or feeding.
Didn't bite the hand, but maybe that somewhere else.
Yeah. Oh, I remember talking to Larry Nichols in probably 1995 or so. We interviewed him for the newspaper. And when we sat down with him in Conway, which is a little north of Little Rock, as soon as we sat down, four guys all dressed in black with big guns on their hips, with no patches, no badges, no nothing. That kind of clued me in right quick then that there was way more to everything that was going on. Even at that time, we were being clued in on a lot of stuff. And I'm amazed that he's still alive today from a lot of information.
I understand he's pretty sick, but still kicking.
Yeah. I mean, he told us, he said, it doesn't matter where I go, and whoever I meet with, these guys or guys like them show up, and they just sit at the next table and listen in and follow whoever's with them for the rest of the time. Yeah, it was not being really in that
Jimmy,
world. It was pretty scary.
It doesn't matter. You can't hide what you can't keep from them what you're saying or what you're feeling. If they want to know, they're going to know. Technology is technology. So.
Yeah, and even now it's far simpler. Back then, our phones are tapped and stuff like that, but now they don't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
We carry around our listening devices with us, right? And with cameras and everything.
Yeah, I mean, our location devices, our listening devices, everything is with us.
Yeah,
you know exactly where you are. That's what I like to. I picked up a Hawaii phone that the U.S. has not doesn't want won't sell in the United States any longer because it doesn't have the tracking entity into it.
Oh.
That's why they downplayed Hawaii as a spy phone, but actually Hawaii had refused to put the tracking device in it.
That's interesting. Yeah, learning a lot here, and it's great stuff. So, do you think there's actually any good guys working on our behalf at all out there, or is it just all dog and pony show?
One has the hope that there are. But the truth is, if there are, and if the entities wanted to take them down at this point, they probably could. You can't have individual entities up against these guys. It has to be masses.
Yeah.
It can't be just a person. It can't be a senator sitting here, a House of Representative sitting there. They're going to blackmail them. They're going to have someone call in some guy or some girl who said they had a relation with them, and they're going to take them down. You can't have a single entity. You have to have masses. In military, we say you got to have boots on the ground, and not a boot on the ground.
Right. Yeah. So what we see in our future, unless we're able to get a lot of people awakened really fast, is not a pretty picture. And I don't like being negative.
Well, shows like this show, like you've been doing this for years. You've opened a lot of people's eyes, Jimmy, and that's admirable. But if more people will do it, and when we talked, I talked a little bit about the Amway way. One person can't do it, but that person can influence two more, who can influence two more, who can influence two more. That's exactly what's going on with coronavirus. One person sick is infecting two more, infecting two more, infecting two more. We can do the same thing with a movement.
Mm-hmm. And we always talk about that on the show, and I always encourage people to share with anybody who's willing to listen. But you're definitely going to run into majority of people at this time who are just fully programmed and fully online with the mainstream narratives, and they're going to just push back unbelievably.
Well, all you have to do is plant the seed and let it grow. Don't push, plant the seed. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. And if you can just drop in a little line and let it go at that, just do that. Unfortunately, a lot of people's sense of self, their sense of self-security, their sense of self-esteem is wrapped up in what they believe. So when you bump up into that and throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into that belief system, it's very devastating for a lot of people, and they don't want to go there.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like it's doing the high wire without the net, or flying without a parachute. It's that kind of thing for them.
Well, I hear many times, Chip, I would die for my country. I said, yeah, but are you willing to go to prison for your country? It's a big difference,
Yeah.
So it's a difficult situation, and they've created an almost impossible situation to overcome in what they're doing here, bringing the world to its knees economically. That's huge, Jimmy.
Well, and not only
that's something that wars haven't even been able to do that.
Right.
This has.
And all the protests that were going on around the world, what happened to them? They're all over with at this point.
It's in all countries. It's not just in one area. It's in all countries, and it's such a huge factor in their world order.
Mm-hmm.
And who can the people count on? The people can count on the government. Who can the government count on? The government has to count on the world financial institutions, which are broke. Like President Moreno said here, the World Bank has no money. So whoever lends or produces money for the World Bank is going to be their dictator.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to dictate what goes on with those funds, how those the IMF and the World Bank will function from there on, and from there the banks will dictate down to the governments how they will function, what they will do. I call it in my new book, De Ver, I call it the genesis of world order.
Yeah, and I read that, and you really documented, how long this has been planned and exactly how they've been rolling this out step by step by quoting their actual meetings and their actual quotes about, what's going on. And we're just seeing it being rolled out. I'm hoping there's going to be a huge resurgence of people. There are people protesting right now, even in the United States. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Now, how effective it's going to be remains to be seen. But we have to stand up for ourselves at some point here, or we're just being bowled over. And I think the other side realizes that too, and they want to kind of keep this thing going as long as possible. And obviously, the centralization is a big deal. A lot of the community hospitals are absolutely empty and going bankrupt. And most of them will be bought out by these big hospital corporations to further consolidate the homogenized type of big pharma health services, if you want to call them that, or health poisoning systems, will be rolled out as well. They've consolidated the mainstream media. They're consolidating many industries. They're totally destroying the mom and pop shops, and mom and pop shops can't sell any essential items. Only Amazon. Isn't that interesting? The big brother of merchandising is the only authorized store now. So that tells you a lot.
Yep.
And I just listening to myself talk, I just want to slap myself and go, this is all gloom and doom. I don't want to be the purveyor of gloom and doom. I want to be optimistic. I want something to hang my hat on that says, hey, this is going to get better and the people are going to stand up. And I'm hoping that that's true. And hope is not a good thing. Hope is a hopium, or it's just another diversion, I guess you could say. We have to actually do something, and other than just sharing with people. And I don't know what is that.
Well, if you look what's going on, and I'm on the basically outside looking in down here,
right,
on what's going on up there, and seeing the people in the street. With this virus, like any infection, what works is distancing. If a tornado's coming, you don't stand in front of the tornado and let it hit you. You move off to the side and let it pass, and then you go in and you work and you repair all the damage that tornado's done. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In this virus, the virus is dangerous, but the virus was created to attack two groups of people: the frail and the elderly. Why would it want to attack? Why would anyone want to get rid of those two groups of people? Because in a world organization, they do not. What do they do for it?
They don't feed the system.
They cost the system.
Right. Pension
so
plans.
People getting back out.
Retirement.
Right. People getting back, social security systems, pensions plans, social medicine, all of that. So people getting back in the street when it's a little too early, the powers that be love to see it because it continues it going.
Mm-hmm.
Get back in the street, do it, but keep your distance, good hygiene, keep your distance, and think about things. Don't be an idiot, because it is an illness. It is something that can kill. It is something you can take home to grandma or grandpa, or your brother or your sister who has diabetes, or anyone with this virus, this pandemic has created. So they've created it, and Dr. Shi was missing 3 vials from her lab in Wuhan. It was created. It was created by Dr. Shi, and she knows it, and now she's being silenced over it. And the other doctors have been killed, scientists have been killed there that wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, and like I said,
But who was it created for? There's our question.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right on target there, that it was created to basically kill off a lot of the elderly and people who were not, who were somewhat of a drain on the system. Although the ultimate drain on the system is the very people who control it. That's the crazy part, right? For them,
yeah,
they're complete parasites. They're nothing more than that. They produce nothing of value. They just suck off the wealth and the energy of the people, and they create nothing of value for us. And not enough people are seeing that yet, but hopefully they will if enough of us keep blabbing about this. And there's no end to their dirty tricks. There's no end to the bag of tricks. Tell us about Ross Perot and your situation regarding that.
Intimidation. In one of our Jupiter Island meetings, Bush and Perot were never good friends. Bush hated Perot, Perot hated Bush. It's always been that way. They've always been enemies. And during the candidacy for the two of them, of course, Perot being independent and Bush Republican, Perot was really gaining in the polls. He was moving along really well. And Bush basically said, I want that SOB out. Tatum, I want him neutralized. I said, sir, I don't do American people. If you want me to go take care of someone in France, I'm your man. If you want me to go take care of someone in Italy, I'm your man, where I have done. I said, but if you want me to do so, want us to work an operation against a U.S. citizen, I've said it before, I've turned them down, and I turned this down, and I quit. And that's what started my problems. But he wanted him, he didn't want him killed. And that's where a lot of people go awry. He didn't want him killed, he just wanted him neutralized. So one of the other commanders, Black Ops commanders, took it on.
They got some dirt on him, right?
No, they threatened his daughter.
That's how they did it.
They threatened his daughter, his daughter was having going to get married, and they threatened to take that wedding out of place. Take down the bride, or take down the groom, but not Ross Perot directly.
Yeah, which effectively took him out.
So he left, and after the wedding, he came back in. Right. Yep.
That's how it works.
And effectively took me out too.
Yeah.
That was the that's what pretty well put me on the wrong side of them. And I'd been looking for a long time how to finally do it, and I just couldn't do it any longer.
Mm-hmm.
I had to live with myself. So, and never an American citizen. That was my point. If I'm working in intelligence, if I'm working in this to defend and to grow the United States of America, I was all for it. I would do whatever I could do, and I was damn good at what I did. And people ask me, "How did you do it?" I said, "I did it well. That's how I did it."
Mm-hmm.
But I won't, and I never have operated against citizens of the United States of America.
I had, I don't know if you're familiar with him. I had Sheriff Richard Mack on here last week on the show, and we were talking about the constitutional issues and my observation, and he has the same one, is that the police and the military would be considered the last stand for people if they realized it. And without the police and the military, of course, these parasites that run things, they're nothing, absolutely nothing. They have the hammer of people who will, basically do whatever they're told. So if we're able, my tact was, if we're able to get our message, to these men and women who have sworn an oath to the Constitution, which we know has been totally ignored, for them to actually stop and think about that, maybe we have a chance. And I asked Sheriff Mack, I said, can you make a video, kind of an open letter video to the police and the military of our country, and maybe appeal to them? Because we're seeing a lot of them now just out there, arresting people and giving fines to people for not social distancing or, this absurd, insane thing that's going on. You think there's any chance we can to a lot of those people and reason with them?
When we worked in regime changes overseas, the entities that we would recruit were always their Justice Department, their judges,
Mm-hmm.
their heads, their generals in charge of police, and their generals in charge of the military, and lower ranking, the head NCOs, the head sergeants, the colonels. Those
Mm-hmm.
are entities that we would always go in to recruit to go in for a regime change, and they're key. And it's the same if you're looking for a regime change. And I'm not talking about the president. I'm talking about the entities that are controlling things in a regime. That's the way to do it. You have to have those groups on your side.
Yeah.
Can it be done? Anything can be done. Just got to figure out how, huh?
You're right. It takes the intent and the will of a lot of people, coming together.
And I'll tell you now, people will have to die for it to happen.
Absolutely.
Regime changes. This kind of thing never happens without sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very sad that it's come down to all of this stuff. It's mind-boggling. So anyway, you've got a lot of interesting articles on your website.
What's the saying? Liberty wasn't free, And
not only that, Benjamin Franklin said, "Hey, we gave you a republic if you can keep it." So, and he was no saint either, but he knew the game and he knew what the stakes were, and they were willing to fight for it. Although the actual republic that we had didn't last all that long, but it was a very brave and bold thing, that they did back in 1700s there. And
he certainly earned his place on the bill.
Yep. Yeah. And we're almost back to that same situation again. Anyway, Gene, we're coming up against the break once again. If there's anybody out there, I think a lot of people in the chat room are probably like, oh my God. If you have questions for Gene, or if you'd like to call in and ask a question, please feel free to do so. We've got one more segment coming up, so stick around with us on Inside the Matrix. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody, to our final segment here on Inside the Matrix with Gene Chip Tatum. It appears that in order to get people off the mark in any way, we need the old 2x4 up across the head. And that's basically what we've got right now. So there is an opportunity for people to wake up and decide that perhaps they're not going to accept this kind of draconian control over our lives. I'm hoping that's what we're going to see as this, begins to be let up, if it ever does. What do you think, Chip? Gene, Chip?
I think it needs to be. I think it needs to be a 4x4 at this point.
Yeah. The 2x4 is not working?
Yeah, no.
Oh my God. Something. But this is pretty severe. I mean, this is absolutely unprecedented in any modern history whatsoever. We've had regimes come and go in various geographic locations, but this is a coordinated worldwide effort. They had enough people in place in all of these different countries to make this work. So that's pretty heavy duty.
Yeah, like I said earlier on the show, man, look at the members of this 2022 U.S.-China board. Look at who's in that. And they talked about when they formed the thing that they wanted that it was an entity for world financiers, economists, and leaders and political leaders to come together to form the foundation for this future economic development of the Sino-US, the US-China Foundation. But when you look at who they finally put on the board, not one American or Chinese politician. It was all financiers, big business owners, corporate owners. Like I say, Gates and Kissinger were the chairs. But they had big pharmacy. They had everyone on that.
Oh yeah, because big pharma is going to play a major role in this, and of course, Gates, the puppet demon out there, is being propped up, and oh my God, he's on every mainstream media show, and he's talking about the virtues of the poison vaccine that they want to try and force everybody to get. I think there's enough info out there about how dangerous vaccines are that's not going to go real easy for them. That's just my take on it. People are going to
it's an easy a vaccine right now is an easy sell. These people, I mean, they're scared to death. So give me a if you say the vaccine works, give it to me, even if it doesn't work. Look, flu vaccines never work because they're based on the flu the year before. And it's always a morphed form in the new year. So the flu vaccines aren't really accomplishing anything except for the big pharmas, the producers of it. Keeps them going.
And what it does is that it just poisons you to a higher degree, so that you'll need to go back to big pharma to get some other kind of medication to cover the side effects of the vaccines and the other dangerous drugs that you've taken. And that's not even including the incredibly dangerous psychotropic drugs that millions and millions of people are taking. You talk about mind control. That was developed long ago.
Are you speaking of marijuana?
No, and absolutely not. I'm talking about Prozac and Xanax and all of those things. And let's talk about marijuana. Let's talk about
look at the great look at the great movement of that right now. What's going on with that? A huge movement. And marijuana is psychotropic, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not. My understanding is that it has many great health benefits. Whereas Xanax and all these other artificial petrochemical
are poison to the brain.
Are poison, yes.
Uh-huh.
So this is something that you've gotten into,
the
right?
problem we run. Yeah, I'm with Valley Medical Group out of Colombia, and also Cannabis of Colombia. We have farms in Colombia, and the research being done in the cannabis field is huge, and what they're coming out with is fantastic. The way it helps detoxify, they're using cannabis heavily down here to detoxify the opiate addictions. There's a lot of good out of it, but then again, there's bad out of it too, because it tends to be abused too.
Well, yeah, and if you have people that are
Abuse is
just
a problem. Right.
yeah, if you have people that are just getting high every day, that just totally takes them out of the game. They're just hanging out, right? They're not going to do anything for anybody or anything. They're just like little pawns in the game. If that's the daily thing, yeah, absolutely.
And when you look at places like Colorado, where they've put recreational use on the table. My son is there. He said, "Dad, everybody's stoned here. We can't get anything done. You go into a store, and, and they ring something up, but it's wrong."
Oh, but there are a lot of.
It's
really
kind of
great...
like I'm almost feeling that there are wonderful benefits out of this new drug, and I'm a proponent of it. I've never used it, but I'm a proponent of its benefits. We produce both CBD and THC, but in drops, and in oils, and I'm a heavy proponent of it. I see what it's done for multiple sclerosis. I see what it's been done for various other diseases, for arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. There's research right now that talks about it being able to invade fast-growing cells and cut blood flow to your fast-growing cells, which are cancerous cells in several types. So there's huge benefits. PTSD. I would love for them to get this into the soldiers' hands for PTSD, the Veterans Administration. But so far, because it's still federally a Class 1 drug, it's not approved for use on the federal side.
Yeah, and these guys really need it. From what they've been through. You've been through hell yourself, and a lot of people just never make it through because look how many of these guys and women are killing themselves after they've been to the Middle East or other places and witnessed what they've witnessed. And I'm sure you've seen some horrific things yourself, but not everybody can even stand up to that. And that should be a wake-up call in and of itself to people. But if it's not happening in their front yard or in their family, they've been sort of programmed to be oblivious to it, right?
As long as they have a roof over their head, food on the table, gas in the car. I'll never in my life forget what he said. And it's so true.
It is. So and it's the bread and circuses, right? That was, mentioned back in Roman times. Give them bread and circuses, and they'll never rebel. Even it reminds me of Bill Cooper.
So Jimmy, are we looking at a new Orwellian world here? 1984 Orwellian world, or
I think we're pretty much there. There's only a few little, few little things to tidy up, but it appears that we're pretty much there. Unless
I think we're pretty close, yeah.
Unless
boots on the ground,
we get boots on the ground that are going to stand their ground. Will there be enough? And that is the big question mark, because humans can be unpredictable, and in spite of all of their predictive programming, their AI, intelligence, social engineering engines, and all that, humans are unpredictable. So, the whole idea of the asymmetrical war and all that, which is really being run on us right now, but there's always two sides to that too. So I'm hopeful that something good will come out, because after 9/11, we did see a lot of people begin questioning things that never, ever questioned anything before, because they smelled a rat. And I think a lot of people smell a rat now. I've seen medical doctors who are, severely mind controlled come out and saying, now they're saying this makes no sense whatsoever. The statistics are wrong. The fact that they're out there telling these guys to how to fill out these death certificates so that it reflects higher numbers of COVID deaths and all this kind of stuff. They're seeing that, this is just BS. And I'm hoping that movement continues with these guys because they've been serving the system for a long, long time.
Well, when they open things back in the States, the only thing I hope people do is practice good hygiene. Practice, if someone's sick, separate a little bit from that person. Ask the person if they're sick to wear a face mask. Look, wearing a face mask isn't protecting a healthy person. It only protects the health workers who are in the vicinity of sick people. So wearing a face mask probably is more harm than good for most people.
Well, and there's some people pass
yourself,
out because
distance
they don't
yourself.
have enough oxygen.
Yeah. Protect yourself, especially in the heat exhaustion. Protect yourself with social distancing and be smart about it. That's all. The problem is there's so many idiots out there that won't be smart, Jimmy. They just won't. They refuse to. Be smart in these times. Get through this tidal wave and see what's left over that we can rebuild the way we want to rebuild it rather than the way they want us to rebuild it.
Right. I think that's good advice and definitely something that we've got to do. We don't really have any choice. We just can't let them steamroll the rest of the way.
Yeah.
So I see the whole CBD thing, the whole marijuana thing as being something really positive. Outside of the idea that there's going to be a certain amount of people who just stay stoned every day and do nothing. But probably those same people would have found a way to do nothing anyway. It's kind of the way I'm seeing it. But those who, need to heal from a lot of different illnesses that were being actually worsened by pharmaceutical drugs will benefit overall from what we're seeing. And of course, if you look back on how Big Pharma got started, with the Rockefellers and their oil companies, and the fact that they went out and vilified marijuana use as being, with the reefer madness and all that stuff, remember? And that's how they did it. Because back then, that's what everybody was using. Everybody was using, the cannabis extracts, the THC and all those, the benefits of marijuana plants for medicinal purposes, and it works for
all
many
these
things.
Dr. Jones wonder drugs were, yeah, that's right.
But they worked, they worked, and but these guys
and they still do. They still do.
Yeah, and these guys were powerful enough, and they used the technology and the knowledge of people like Edward Bernays, with their propaganda to eliminate the competition and take over all the medical schools and the training and the curriculum of doctors. So doctors have become prescription writers for them.
Mm-hmm. I've thought often about opening a small clinic down here for treatment and education and training on how to effectively use the drops and how to grow your own. The how to grow and extract into a pharmaceutical grade, not the garage grade stuff that could harm you with the different extract chemicals. I've thought often about doing a little clinic down here in Ecuador and providing that.
I think that would be an awesome
we'll see what goes in
idea.
the future.
Yeah, that would be a tremendous idea, especially down there. And I think
send them home with pharmaceutical grade seeds. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the idea of growing your own and learning to process it yourself. That's what everybody should be able to do. Yep. And I think that's a fantastic idea. And I hope you're able to do that because the people will benefit. And with a lot less regulation down there, I'm assuming that, you could probably pull that off.
I mean, we could do it now. We've got the companies in place to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, definitely keep me posted on that because I think that would be a great thing. So we've already determined that our savior, Mr. William Barr, is not going to do the job, huh?
No, I don't think so. I think he's going to protect existence and the place of the office of the president so that it doesn't lose its power. That's what he's all about.
Mm-hmm. And
protecting the office, not the man.
Yeah, and then people say, "Oh, Durham, he's the bulldog. He's going to get all the dirt on all these deep state, high-level players, and he's going to take them all down." Well, it's pretty much the same story there too. Do you know anything about his background?
Well, Durham can't take him down. All he can do, no U.S. attorney can take him down. It takes the attorney general to do it. He has to prove it. He has to say, yes, do it. Thus, the judges. You see what I was saying earlier?
Mm-hmm. So even if they indict him, doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere, right?
Look, you can indict a ham sandwich. It doesn't. They can indict any of those guys right now. Whether you prosecute or eat that ham sandwich is a different story.
Well, we see how there's the cover system is. You got somebody like Clinton, both Clintons, but Hillary in particular is so obviously a criminal. So obviously they use their foundation for pay for play and everything else. So obviously the corruption, and yet nothing has happened to them. Nothing. It's like, oh yeah, we'll tell you about it, but we're certainly not going to do anything about it.
No, the pay to play, but the pay. But listen, that pay to play has been in place a long time. It's nothing new,
No, so, but it's just now it's public knowledge, and
with the transparency, world transparency, it's here more now. Yeah, no.
That's the only difference,
as usual,
I guess.
Huh?
Yeah, it's just still business as usual, but we're going to tell you about it now. Whereas before we didn't.
But they got away with it.
Yep.
They got away with it. So Biden told his son, "Heck, son, let's do that. Let's go to Ukraine and pay to play." And they did. And they got away with it.
And China, $1.5 billion from China. That's mind-boggling. That they're and nobody's disputing that. I mean, they might dispute it. The Bidens might, but nobody else is really disputing that happened. They're just not going to do anything about it. Oh, we have to laugh. I mean, I have to laugh.
Ask about it.
What's that?
Ask about it. It's a non-talking point. They just don't talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. We'll let you know what's happening, but that's going to be the extent of it. And we're not going to go any further with it. We're not going to talk about it anymore. You've already heard it. You know about it. So just shut up, Oh, Lordy. Yep. Mankind has not learned the lessons yet. And so apparently it has to get a hell of a lot worse before it's going to get better, before people will stand up. And I don't like saying that, but it appears to be so. Yeah. And
I think Louis Armstrong hit it. It's a Wonderful Life.
It is for some people.
They want everyone just to sit down and sing that song. That's all they want.
Yeah. Keep them entertained. Give them a little food, and the minions will be happy to just exist. And some of us just don't feel
go on vacation a couple weeks a year. We're happy.
Yeah. Take off from your slave job. Supporting the parasites, the psychopaths that run the world, gladly support them and uphold their virtues. Ho, ho, ho. And I saw a YouTube video where they were saying that there's actually a corona god out there. And the time to worship the corona god, which is the god of some illnesses or disease or something like that, it was from March to May 15th. So maybe there's something to that, and they're adhering to the ancient mythical god of corona.
Well, I'm self-medicating right now, just so you know, for corona.
With the quinine?
No, a glass of Corona a day. That's a little lemon Corona.
So you got to wonder. It's definitely a double-edged sword for that company, the beer company, right? So, their name is everywhere, but it's not. But there's what they say is no such thing as bad publicity, right? So your name's out there every day. Everybody's talking.
Yeah.
My Corona. Yeah, reminds me of the song, something similar. Well, again, I want to be able to say something really, really positive, and I'm hard pressed to do it, except to be hopeful that more people will, decide to, see things for what they are, and see what this really is about. Other than that, what do you think?
I think after the storm, we just need to pick up the pieces and build it back our way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what has to be done. They're throwing us to our knees, and they're doing a good job at it. They're throwing all the governments to their knees, and they'll be dictating as time comes on. They'll be dictating. Look, they're talking about nationalizing the energy companies right now. There's no doubt which direction they're going, but we, the people, need to decide how we want to rebuild our economy, which direction we want to go. And we can do that. Because it's all about the money, and if we don't spend money, if we don't put it where they want us to put it, then they're shit out of luck.
Yeah, and that is such a good point, because we do have that ability to decide where we spend our money at. Obviously, we need the necessities of life, but beyond that, and who are we going to support with our funds? Are we going to support the mom and pop shops? Or are we going to support Amazon only and Walmart? I mean, those are choices that we can make. If a company, if you don't buy their products, if you don't become a customer of theirs, eventually they go out of business. So that we do have that economic power that people never consider, really.
Buy from little mom and pop stores, your corner store, Keep them in business. That's the cornerstone of our America.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. That's something absolutely we have to do. We don't have any choice. If we keep going the way we're going with nationalized everything, whether it's this healthcare and the takeover of all these hospitals, which is rather apparent right now, that's going to happen. Unless people fight for their community hospitals and try and keep them going. But even that, they're already controlled by big pharma, but you don't have any chance of anything else being introduced into a megalithic corporate hospital environment, where a small group of corporations own and control it. Anyway, Gene, thanks so much. We've reached the end of the show. Thanks so much for being here with us and sharing your insight and your experience with us. And everybody, we'll see you next week. You've been listening to Inside the Matrix. Take care, everybody.
This is Inside the Matrix, hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Live every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
It is worldwide.
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location deep within the neon capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. For more information on the host and the show, please visit InsideTheMatrix.org. That's InsideTheMatrix.org. It's time to break the chains of manipulated consciousness and claim our true nature as creative divine beings. Inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.